Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Linda.
You're welcome. This is fun.
I really enjoyed reading 470. Were there any lessons in writing the book about permaculture?
Thinking about climate change, I'd known about it. I'd been thinking about it for years. I read the science, and yet it just didn't seem to be gaining traction. I know there's climate science denialists out there, but it wasn't them that I was thinking about. It was all the people that I know who believe it, see it, but just don't seem to be really living it, don't seem to be acting as if it's true, including my own, including me a lot of the time. I was thinking, here I am saying I believe it, but, really, do I act as if I totally get it? Because I was living a fairly permaculture-y life, and that led me into thinking, how would you explore what it might really be like? And that led me into thinking novel and characters. And once I got down into that detail of, do I know what these characters would do then? Do they know what they would do then? But then there's also, do I even know what they would do? So there was a really big process of thinking then, of putting myself in the situation that the characters would be in and going, now do I know what to do? And then, do they know what to do? What would they do? What would all the people around them do? So yes, I learned, the short answer to the question is I learned a lot just by that immersion in the imagining.
With anything like this sort of future scenarios, is always going to stir up emotions and get people scared. But the few things I didn't expect to be alarmed about was women's rights. I didn't expect to be thinking about, wow, what if we went to a time where there was no contraception? Yes, I hadn't even thought about that. So I thought that was genius. Thank you for starting that conversation.
Contraception was kind of indicative of all those little pharmaceuticals that we absolutely take for granted.
Now that I've been lulled into this modern existence.
Climate science is so much about believing and trusting the science, and yet it might throw us into a situation where what we've got to believe and trust as well, along with the science, is all the other ways and kinds and places knowledge is stored. Confronting the idea of knowledge that might be useful. A lot of times I'd get to writing something and I'd end up researching that, and then I would end up in this huge, great long rabbit hole that often ended up in the book with one tiny little line by the time I'd figured out not just what would happen, but how would it look from when you were within it and you didn't know what was happening. Would they have the internet? What would happen to the internet? And off I went down this huge batch of information. There are a lot of people who would retain that knowledge, communities of people who do know how to do the internet from scratch. There are those of us who know how to garden from scratch, and there are those of us who know how to cook from scratch, and there are those of us who know how to do. And that brought me into a whole nother conversation about needing community and needing this variety of skills and knowledge and needing to trust one another in terms of expertise and knowledge, and be aware of what you don't know. The whole thing of we need a community. We can't be self-sufficient.
And I also liked it how you touched on the land capability. How much can a utopia support, and what the edges would look like, and how that would be threatened by starvation outside your peaceful island if you were able to create that, so to speak. And how much can someone engage? So when you talk about knowledge and that there are keepers of knowledge and there would be these seeds of new knowledge, how do you pass that on if you're traveling with very limited energy?
Yes. And how, do you choose to bubble? That was one of the themes that emerges, was this extreme localism. Like people's worlds will in physical form shrink to their extreme localism. But at the same time, I think there is the internet, and so that gives you a whole world outside. And there is that sense of being engaged with the rest of the world. How would it change the consciousness of what it is to be human and what it means to be human, to know that there are people in the world, lots of people in the world, who are starving, who aren't able to live in any nice little bubble you can create for yourself. And of course, that doesn't mean that you're a masochist and you go starve along with them, but it changes your consciousness. It changes your consciousness of what it means to be human. So I was engaging with all those kind of ideas too, of macro level and micro level, prepping and defense, insiders and outsiders, and how that would work. So there's all those themes running through it too, that I didn't intend to put there. I found as I wrote it, I found, I thought, what would people do? What would happen?
So one of the things that I felt it toyed with a little is how much energy do we wish to spend on being defensive when we can be creative? And how much energy should we be spending on being defensive of our creative things? Because when we create something, we know how much energy's gone into that. But when someone robs you, they don't necessarily understand. And so they're wasteful with it, as you toyed with the boy who jumped the fence and stole food and then threw it. To him, it didn't cost much to get the food. But what motivated him to try and get the food in the first place must have been that he was starving. So it was great. It covered a lot of issues that are still very relevant today, and they're not just going to be relevant in the future.
Again, this was something that I didn't consciously set out to do, but emerged in doing it, was you end up with these people who solve all those problems in different ways according to both their own knowledge. Like some of my characters they aren't permaculturists, they're brand spanking new to the whole concept, but they're not stupid. People aren't stupid. They solve those problems in the best ways that they can, but also too within their own temperament. It meant getting inside the skin of other people and feeling their characteristic ways of dealing with both physical problems and dilemmas that are confronting them, but also how do they process grief? Like how do they process loneliness? How do they process feelings of dependency or feelings of having dependence? How do they process threats like that? For some people, when somebody jumps the fence like that, their reactions will be different. That's the thing about writing a novel, is you can't make every character isn't you. No characters are me. You can't think in your own skin. There's a lot of discarded chapters in there that were me trying to deal with my deepest fears, night terrors to do with climate change and people. How would I deal with those really not nice people? So I do think the vast majority of people are good people who are trying to solve problems as they're confronted to them. I've got characters who get really angry with the people around them because the people around them are solving the problem from within a different skin. There are characters in there, probably who I'm talking about, who I thought were going to be much more bad guys when I started writing them. But once I got inside their skin and went, would they? What would they do once they're actually face to face with having to carry through the kind of decisions that they thought they could make? A character there who kind of thinks of himself in the early days as a prepper, as somebody who will defend his boundaries. But I wondered, I was imagining somebody imagining. Is that all in his own imagination? And what would he do when he's face to face with it?
If I'm thinking about the character that starts with C, he probably realizes it's not just about him, but it's part of a community, and he has to consider the other people in his community, right? Because he sees himself as a leader, so he can't just act on a gut instinct to be violent. He has to think about the ramifications. And I thought that was really great how you actually explored consensus and the way that people could have a rational conversation with very different angles. I thought that was beautifully executed.
I've been in that space a lot of times. Those of us who have grey hair and have been in community organisations and volunteer and activism have spent a lot of time trying to reach consensus with people over issues. That was a theme that I deliberately explored. Social permaculture is a really important skill. And I remember reading a long time ago a quote from John Seymour, who's a self-sufficiency guru of the 70s, before permaculture even. And there's a quote in there that growing the food is the really easy bit. It's the social arrangements that are the hard bit. And I think that stuck with me because it aligned with my own experience. The skills of social permaculture are really important and really quite rare skills in our society, and are nowhere near as easy. You know, they get skimmed over as if, oh, yes, that's easy. And a lot of the how-to books I read, I go, yeah, sure, we'll try that. I've seen it's hard. They're big skills and they're important skills. They're learnable skills, but a lot of people who think they have them don't.
What would be the most important elements of a social permaculture discussion?
You don't want to be self-sufficient all on your own. The minute your bubble even expands beyond your own household, your own intimate partners, your own family, your extended family, and then it keeps on going, you know, out and out and out and out and out. And you find yourself having to work under stress. Those relationships have to work under the kind of big stress that we're likely to confront with climate change. People need to slip into them really smoothly and efficiently. It's like when you're gardening for fun, you can afford a lot of mistakes and you can afford a lot of non-productivity. And when you're gardening in a way that if this doesn't work, I don't eat, and I haven't really got a season or two to experiment with it, find something that works and trial and error it. And I think we're going to need to be gardening with that level of expertise, but we're also going to need to be doing social permaculture with that level of ease of, yes, I know how to do this. I can slip straight into it. I don't need to trial and error and make a lot of mistakes. In those frames all the way out, from the people I need to help with broken legs and emergencies like that, from the people I need for security, through to the people I need to make decisions about dependency on, you know, how thin can I spread myself, to the people that I need to defend, to create boundaries with, you know, all the way out, those decisions need to be made. And if those relationships can't be worked smoothly, then you just waste a huge amount of energy on it.
So let's say we're prepping for a social dilemma. What's something I could do right now?
Oh, I think that's what I said, was it's not easy. I think you need a lot of practice. Again, I guess I could draw the analogy to gardening. There's a lot of information out there. And I'll back up a bit, and that analogy to gardening is a very good one, actually. I often see in the permaculture forums somebody say, tell me what's the best way to deal with caterpillars on my brassicas, on my cabbage. And I go, well, that's a much bigger question than you know it is. You know, like, how far back do we go here? Let's, you know, start with soil, start with soil microbes, keep going backwards and backwards and backwards. Start with the whole ecosystem and predators and big question, not a simple matter of swat the creature that's doing it. And I think the same applies to social permaculture. When you say, how do I run a meeting well? It's like, come on, we'll go backwards and backwards and backwards here. That's a big question. There's a lot of unpacking to do in that. What I would say is the sooner people start, the better.
Yeah. So quite a few people have been saying to me, the first step is to be comfortable within. Well, it's like looking after your soil, is actually getting back into the depths of your soul and to make sure that's healthy. And then reaching out. So what would the next step be?
I think it's really, really important to be healthy. That's one of the things that is going to stand people in really good stead, being both physically and mentally healthy. Caring for your own mental and physical health is going to be important. That again, under stress, there aren't the extra resources. I explored that idea a bit of how will it be possible for us as a society to take care of the people who are dependent, both physically and mentally, you know, people who are not coping. I've got characters who are coping, but there are characters who are not coping. And how much capacity is there going to be to take care of those characters who are not coping? The question is a really good one. How do you put yourself in the kind of state of being that you'll be one of the ones who is capable of giving support rather than the one of the people who's looking for it? Because if you're looking for it, you might not find a lot of it. And I think it's a great question, but I don't really know the answer to that.
Well, it's a great book because it brought up those questions. If you look up about being a prepper, they'll tell you to an amazing array of things that you have to have. But socially, I don't know that we've actually touched on this much. And you do show that the characters are capable of supporting people. But as you said, how many people can you support? Physically,
Yeah.
you could maybe do the calculations on the back of an envelope. I can work out how much I could grow here without compromising the ecosystem.
Mm.
Mentally, I don't know how we could prepare. We can prepare maybe by having good networks.
Yes, it sounds really cliche and really obvious, but being nice, like the people who are not nice, the people who are difficult to get along with, who are obnoxious, not kind, sounding very hippie and loving here, but people who are not loving. My kids talk about getting on the zombie apocalypse team. I think that there's a generation that uses that as the shorthand for the things that get you on the zombie apocalypse team are having some useful tradable skill, some skill that is important, that's tradable, that's important to people in general, and being easy to get along with, being tolerant, being not quick to anger, being able to think outside your own skin, being able to put yourself in other people's shoes, all of those kind of skills that are the subtext of just being nice are what get you on the zombie apocalypse team. The characters who are not nice find themselves isolated just by the fact that other people don't want to cooperate with them. If you've got a choice of trading with somebody that you know will be fair and easy to make deals with, you'll deal with them rather than somebody that you know you're going to have to defend against.
Yeah.
Caring. It's care and consideration. And people have it in different ways. My characters have it in different ways. Like some of the characters are tough and their forte is defense, like their forte is keeping the boundaries clear. And some of the characters are much softer and their forte is reaching out to need, So I think there's many different ways of doing that, but it's about care. Care for people, care for the earth, distribute the surplus. They're really basic permaculture ethics, and I think they stand you in good stead.
Yeah, great. Some of your softer characters, let's say Sophie, who's a great cook and has all these projects on the go, because she's a bit too nice sometimes, she doesn't set her boundaries in saying, oh, please don't use, and when a guest comes to your home, you don't want to be giving them a long list of rules.
Yeah.
She doesn't lose her temper about the fact that they've completely now got no more sourdough starter flour, and she doesn't lose her temper about some plants being ripped out when they weren't weeds and things like that. So do you think perhaps there's a danger of being too nice?
She has other defences. I think I did want to contrast her way of dealing with it, the tougher characters. I think I did want to raise that question of where is the line in there. That's the advantage of writing a novel, is that you can explore the grey areas. And I think there's a big grey area in there between what you might do in times of affluence and what you might do in times when you don't have enough to share. We're not used to, in affluent Western societies, getting right to that boundary and knowing what we would do ourselves. I wanted to explore that for myself. I wanted to go, now what would I do? How would I feel when I'm right on that boundary? Like normally, if somebody stole food out of my garden because they were hungry, it wouldn't make me angry. If that was the line between me feeding the people who are close to me and not being able to feed them, people going hungry, how would I feel? And what would I do? And how would I respond? They're hard questions. Tim Winton, I think, said that one. Novels are better at raising questions than giving answers.
Yeah, and I loved it how you were able to sneak in all these little techniques from the elders going, oh no, why didn't they do it this way?
Yes.
Pick the beans or pick those with two hands, not with one hand. And instead of thinking it, he didn't think to reach out and teach because it wasn't the right situation.
Yeah.
So, but it still taught the reader all these subtleties, the things that you learn by doing.
When a character speaks, they're both telling the reader and they're telling the other character, and they're telling the reader and the other character different things. The dialogue can be understood in a completely different way by a reader who who knows all the secrets, knows all the stuff that the other character doesn't know, but read in a completely different way by the other character. So that's when you find yourself all the time through a novel going, no, don't do that, because you know what the character doesn't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it was good fun. Are you hoping that there might be some fan fiction that comes out of this?
Oh, I hadn't even thought of that, but what a lovely idea. When people ask me if I'm going to write a sequel, I always say the analogy is like asking someone after they've just had a baby, are you planning the next one? And you go, no, never again. Love the idea of fan fiction. Who knows what might happen in the future? I mean, those questions are still there for me too, like I'm still exploring what might happen, how might it flow.
You try very hard. I can feel it in the book that you try hard to be optimistic and to find ways out of conflict.
When I started off writing, I was writing out of a certain amount of fear of my own, of are we looking at a survival threat? As the more I wrote though, the more I felt like I couldn't imagine the situation where they would be under survival threat. I probably can't say too much more without it being a spoiler, but I do think that we're headed for socio-economic collapse just in time to prevent total ecological collapse.
Yeah.
That was the way it worked through for me. And whether you think that that's a saving, a good thing, or a bad thing, probably depends on where you're coming from and how dire you think the other options are. To me, that's a hopeful thing, because I don't think normal is particularly wonderful. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of grief no matter what. I'm not hopeful to the point of going, this could it have a happy ending. We've locked in losses of species, we've locked in huge losses already, and huge losses of people's lives, huge grief we've locked in already. But within that, I also think there is hope. I don't, it's not a dystopian novel. It's even in the most dire circumstances, there's hope.
Yeah. I didn't find it depressing. I found it exciting and alarming. So I am worried about people who would be denialists and to the very end. That I feel would be sad, to see people who didn't feel they could do anything else or they couldn't change. And you do deal with some people like that who say, oh no, I want to hold on to my job and my super and I don't want to change. So yeah, thank you. You cover a lot of material and a lot of ideas. The other thing about law and order, everyone would get excited about that in a normal sort of zombie apocalypse situation. And you do try to question that.
Research says that in crises, people actually react, their better selves come out. And, we see that in Australia with bushfires and natural disasters, because there is a lot of media value in sensationalism. The media doesn't portray that as much as it is in real life. Like in real life, people are much more cooperative and positive.
Well, thank you so much, Linda, for speaking with me today.
You're very welcome. It's been lovely.